All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive with me. Today, we're going to be looking at something I know is super relevant to everyone listening, taxes.
More specifically, we're going to be diving deep on progressive tax rates.
That's right. Progressive tax rates. Now, I know that can sound kind of, complicated and maybe even a little bit boring.
Yeah.
But trust me on this one. This is something that affects all of us, no matter where we live or what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely worth wrapping our heads around.
Absolutely.
So let's start with just the real basic definition. What exactly are we talking about when we say progressive tax rates?
Well, in the simplest terms, it means that the more money you make, the higher percentage of your income you pay in taxes.
Okay, so the more you earn, the more you contribute.
Exactly.
Okay, so the flip side of that would be everyone just pays the same amount no matter how much they make.
That's right. That would be a flat tax system where everyone pays the same percentage.
Okay, I see. So with this progressive system, it's kind of like saying, okay, if you're doing really well, you can afford to chip in a little bit more.
Yeah, that's the general idea. It's all based on this concept called ability to pay. If you have more resources, you have a greater ability to support things like public services and stuff.
I got it. That makes sense. So where do we actually see this progressive tax system in action?
Well, it's pretty common in lots of developed countries. Like Australia, for example, has a really clear-cut progressive tax system.
Okay. Yeah, and I know we did some research on Australia's system specifically. Can you kind of walk us through how that one works?
Sure. So let's say someone in Australia makes, $50,000 a year. Mm-hmm. They'd probably fall into a tax bracket where they pay around 19% of their income in taxes.
Okay.
But someone making, say, $200,000 a year, they might end up in a bracket where they're paying 45% on some of their income.
Okay, that's a pretty big difference.
Oh.
So the more you make, the higher that percentage climbs.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. But I got to admit, you just used that phrase tax bracket a couple times. And honestly, that always kind of throws me off a bit. Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, sure. So it's not like your entire income gets taxed at that higher rate.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. It's more like as your income goes up, you kind of step into different brackets and each bracket has a different tax rate.
I see. So it's not like all of a sudden, bam, 45% of everything you made is gone. It's more like a staircase, right? Each step is a different income level. And as you move up, you pay a little more on that step.
Yeah, that's a really good way to picture it.
Cool. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So I guess the next big question is, why should any of us really care about this? How does this actually affect people in their everyday lives?
Well, first of all, I think it's just important to understand where your tax dollars are going and how the system works. Whether you agree with it or not, it's kind of the backbone of how governments fund all sorts of stuff like roads and schools and healthcare.
Yeah, it's easy to just kind of tune it out and be like, oh, taxes, whatever.
Right.
But this stuff really does affect everything.
Absolutely. And it also raises some really interesting questions about fairness and equality. Is it fair to ask people who earn more to contribute more? Yeah. Or does that discourage people from working harder or taking risks?
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I bet there are people out there who'd say, hey, if I'm going to get taxed more for making more money, why even bother?
That's a totally valid point. And there are definitely people who argue that high tax rates on higher earners can actually hurt the economy. They say it discourages people from investing or starting businesses. But then there are also a lot of people who say that progressive taxes are super important for making sure everyone has access to things like healthcare and education.
So it's like finding a balance between individual success and kind of the collective good, right?
Right, exactly. And there's no easy answer. It really comes down to values and priorities.
Yeah.
What kind of society do we want to live in and what role do we think the government should play?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's more than just numbers on a tax form. It's about the big picture.
Absolutely.
Well, I got to say, I feel like I learned a lot today. And honestly, I think this is something that everyone should really think about and try to understand better. It's not just about taxes. It's about how we function as a society.
Couldn't agree more. And what I find really interesting is that all these different tax systems, they don't exist in a vacuum. You can actually see the real world effects of them all around us.
Oh, totally.
Think about the quality of public transportation or the state of our schools, or even how easy or difficult it is to access healthcare. all of that stuff is directly tied to how we choose to fund our governments and what we prioritize.
Yeah, it's like a ripple effect.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I think we've given everyone a lot to chew on today. Hopefully next time you hear someone talking about taxes, maybe you'll have a little bit more insight into what's really going on.
And hopefully a lot more questions.
Always more questions. All right. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.